Hi, I'm Iver Lofving, and this is the mural that I painted last winter for Westernset Arts Council. And it's the history of Skowhegan from 1820 to 2022. And it runs, the timeline moves along, and the seasons move along. And the big people are kind of in the bottom here, and then it moves up until you get to smaller people and landscape elements on the top, and of course it says Skowhegan for context up top. So we're going to start over here in 1820, and in 1820, of course, Maine became a state due to the Missouri Compromise, and they didn't actually have a flag, but this was what was stipulated by the Maine Constitution. And you have Moxie Mountain up top here, and Moxie Mountain, when you go up the Kennebec Valley, you'll see Moxie Mountain in many places. And it was named after Chief Moxas of the Kennebec Indians, Kennebec tribe. And then you have animals. You have lots of animals, including salmon that were kind of extirpated from this area, mountain lions, or catamounts, and a bear. And then you come down here and a little bunny here. And then you have, this was the big time for farming in the Kennebec Valley. A lot of people moved in and they became farmers, and a lot of them would drink at the old Lock Tavern, which is burned down just recently, but it was an old building in that they built, and they had a tavern there. Of course, they made their own beer and stuff, and the stagecoach would come in, and that's how people would get around. And oxen were big. A lot of people had oxen. That was the pickup truck of the day, to have oxen. And this depicts the Underground Railroad, which was big here in Skowhegan. And you got to remember that it was also illegal at the time to harbor runaway slaves. So here's a runaway slave family, and I think that some of the clergy in the area were involved in it, and so they would help them go to Canada. So here's these same people in the back of the cart here, and of course they would probably be covered up. And the interesting thing I found out was, I was talking to the Cafords who lived here in Skowhegan, and they said that their house was one of the stops on the Underground Railroad. And they had to keep it very secret, but they would bring people in, you know, serve them some food and stuff, and then the next day you would go to the next stop, and the next stop had to be, 10 or 15 miles away. So you take them to the next one. Then I met a person from the Weston family in Madison, and it turns out the Westons were another stop, and they had to get them all the way to Canada because of the fugitive slave laws. So here they are heading to Canada. And then we're moving along, and you have the Philbrick brothers, who were potters in this town. And so the Philbricks would make pottery right here in Skowhegan, and they were really amazing potters, and their pottery is still around. And then one of the Philbricks became kind of a rich man. He actually got involved in land speculation and lumbering and things like that, and they actually did very well. And now there's the Kai's Philbrick Insurance Company. And now over here you got the old high school, and the old high school was a building that was on the island. It's torn down now, and you got a guy with a Skowhegan sweater on. And the Savages, Lisa Savage and some other people reminded me that this was the clothing that they would wear. And they would actually they'd have gym up here in the upstairs of the fire department. And this is the fire department back in the day, ready to go. And down here you have the big mansion that's on the south side, and that was Governor Abner Coburn's mansion. It's still there. And here's Governor Abner Coburn, and he was actually Maine's governor during the Civil War. And so they mustered a whole lot of people, and they went down to Augusta, and I guess it was very cold, and some of them died from the cold and stuff, getting ready to go to the Civil War. And you got a little guy fishing. And Skowhegan was one of the first towns to have electricity. It was only 4 years after Philadelphia. they had a hydroelectric dam, and they would get electricity, and you could tell that some of the electricity is kind of scary in the back, some of the houses. You got the old knob and tube and stuff. So we've had it for a long time. And as you move along here, we've got Governor Coburn's niece, Louise Helen Coburn, and she started the sorority Sigma Kappa down in Colby College, and then it went national and worldwide. So Sigma Kappa is still going, and she was one of the founders of that, and she was one of the first co-eds at Colby College. And then later on she became famous for Coburn Woods and what?
Somerset Woods Trustees.
Yes, the Somerset Woods Trustees, which will come in a little later, were started by, the first land trust in the state was started by Louise Helen Coburn. And she was also a poet, and she did all sorts of amazing things for the area. It started the History House also, which we'll get to in a second. The building that the Philbrick brothers are posted in front of became the History House, and that was started by Louise Helen Coburn. And then we got the library, which was a fantastic library, also helped out by the Coburns, and still going. And then you got the Anadromous Hospital, and the Anadromous Hospital was started by a guy by the name of Dr. Conant, who was never a doctor. He was a photographer, actually, but he came up with a miracle cure where you would be put into a box and steam would come up around you. It had a little burner underneath the seat, and the steam would come up around you. And it was basically a cure for anything that ailed you. And people would come from many, many places and go to the Anadromous Hospital and get cured. And they also would sell a box that you could bring home and you could get cured. And you would feel really well. Then you had to have more 2 weeks later because it contained about 2% opium. And then you got people coming into town. You got the old bridge. There used to be a bridge across the river, and it was a toll bridge. You had to pay to go across there, and you couldn't go with your horses at anything faster than a walk. And then you got downtown kind of here, and the trolley. Because we had electricity, they had trolleys, and these trolleys would run to Lakewood, and you also out to Norwich Walk, where they had kind of near Norwich Walk, they had a nice little park for people to kind of recreate at the end of the trolley line. And so you got, some of these are shops that I found in a, where the shops were, so they're just sort of approximate. But you got the Green and Barnard shop, boots and shoes, that really was there. And you have all sorts of shops downtown, the drugstore, Palmer and Merrill. You got Blunt Hardware, which has turned into Quinn Hardware. And you got a Cop downtown, and millinery, which is, I think, mostly ladies' hats. And you got downtown happening down here. There's the old bank there, and you have a hot dog stand. Apparently, after the Centennial Exhibition, everybody got into hot dogs, or Frankfurts, as they called them, sauerkraut, onion, and so we have a log drive happening here, and this was done by John Alsop, and I imagine one of the guys from the log drive up here buying the crew a hot dog. And then down here, we have Hannah Starbird, who was a famous Civil War nurse, and she also became the head of a bunch of nurses associations, and here she is tending to an injured soldier here. And then this is the famous IWW strike, and what happened with that was a young woman by the name of Mamie Bilodeau was being sexually harassed by her boss, Charles North, and what happened was she got fired. So then she started up labor action, and the IWW got involved, and it was their most successful strike. It went international and became very famous, and they eventually acceded to the workers' demands, which were probably like a 12-hour day, 6 days a week or something, So anyway, they went okay, and then they managed to settle the strike. And so now we're moving along, and this is a family, all in 1920s fashions. And we're moving into the time of vehicles, cars and stuff. And so, of course, there's a log truck going through town. That still happens. And you got Hite Ford up there. Hite started as a Ford dealership. And you got a little guy up there hunting in the woods, way up there. And, of course, we're moving, the time is moving too. So we're moving through fall. So if you look way up, you'll see there are Canada geese flying, heading south, down the river. And you got the furniture and law office, and the only one thing that is still here in downtown Skowhegan, after all these years, is Russakoff Jewelers. It was started by, I think, Abe Russakoff, and he came from Russia a long, long time ago, and came here and started the jewelry shop. And then there's, of course, Paradise Suites, and the richest guy in town in his Cadillac. And then you got the train station back there. And now we're moving into winter. So you can see a little snow coming down, and you see DB's store. And Peter DB, who was from Italy, started a store. It was very popular. And of course, this is during the Prohibition time. So you got a guy back here with a bottle that says XXX, right? And then the way to get around back then, well, we'll go here first. This is the Skowhegan Ice Company, and people would, this ice was shipped all over the place, but that's what you would have. You'd have a big chunk of ice, and you put it in the bottom of your ice box, and it would keep your food fresh. So you got delivered this stuff, and there's signs. There's actually one at the miller's table that tells the prices per hundredweight. You get a big chunk of ice put into your ice box, and you're good to go for like a week or something. And back in 1919, we had another pandemic. This one was the Spanish flu, and this was absolutely came out of a picture here. And of course, it says, wear a mask. This was not the most recent pandemic, but the one way back then. And it killed a lot of people, and people did believe in masks, and it did help people a lot. And then you got the Main Central Railroad. Here he is coming into town, and they would go, there was a big roundabout on the south side, and they would back into town and then let everybody off, and then they would come back out and continue down. So he had to turn the train around, but I thought it looked better like this. And then you got the county jail up here and a railroad crossing sign. See the railroad crossing sign? That keeps could keep you from getting mushed by the train or vehicles. And below the county jail, notice there's a guy in the county jail, not too happy, but down below that is the air raid warden. And he was here to make sure that everybody in town put down blackout curtains, because it was the Second World War. They were worried about the Germans coming over and bombing us. So they had to put down blackout curtains, and you had to be, your house had to be dark after, 8 o'clock at night or something. And then you got Santa and some kids, and they kind of look like they're waiting for their presents. And then you got Sabrina, which was a big movie in 1954 or so. And you got a lawyer coming down out of the county courthouse right there. That was the county courthouse, still is. That was built by the Coburns, and the Coburns actually had the county seat moved from Norwich Walk to Skowhegan. They built the courthouse, and that's why they moved it over here. And then you got Eisenhower. Now, Eisenhower actually showed up in the summer, but this is in the 1950s. He came and he visited the town, and in the back seat is Edmund Muskie. He was back there for the whole thing. And of course, along also Margaret Chase Smith was there. Margaret Chase Smith is probably Skowhegan's most famous resident and the former senator. And she is most famous for the Declaration of Conscience. And she's wearing her live rose. She had like a little vial of water that would contain a live rose at all times. And we're moving on in winter. And what do you do in the winter? Around here, everybody used to go to Eaton Mountain, and it was a lot of fun. And so they had a giant wood stove in the place there, and they had great soups and things. And everybody would learn to ski at Eaton Mountain and have a really good time. And then you got they call it the Opera House. When I first got to town, they called it the Opera House. I was like, where's this Opera House? Well, it is the municipal building. And so here's a concert going on in the Opera House. And here's a 57 Chevy. So they're very proud of that. And you got the drive-in theater, and see you in the spring, because obviously this is winter here, and some kids sliding. I said sledding, and I was corrected. Nobody ever went sledding around here. They went sliding. So there they is. Sliding. All right, and then you got the SD Warren Paper Company, and he got a guy just is very proud of his short box Chevy, square Chevy, and there he is. He's working at the paper mill, and of course, basketball is a big thing to do around here in the winter. And here's the Skowhegan girls taking on Mount Blue in the basketball. And then of course you got sugaring. We're moving into the spring slowly, and sugaring has always been a big thing around here, but it really took off in the 70s. The Steves family and a number of others started up some sugaring around here, and we had the first Maine Maple Sundae right here in Skowhegan. So there's all the typical things here. You've got the squirrels being chased by dogs here. You got the kids helping out, and you got the young lovers in the woods up here, and of course checking the buckets. And then you got, as we move down here, we've got the Catholic Church. Now the thing about the Catholic Church is it was very big with the Franco-American community, and so I imagine this is Father Moe talking to the Franco-American community here. And in 1987 we had a huge flood. So this is the flood of 87 right here. And of course there's cows and houses and things floating down the river. And a big person around here who started something called Teens in Theater and also has a school named after her is Marty Stevens. She was very big on education, and she did a great job of taking care of some of the kids that went to the alternative school. And here's DB Park here, but we're going to move back up here, and we're now looking at Lake George Regional Park, which was a collaboration between the two towns, Skowhegan and Canaan, and that is amalgamation of all the rangers at Lake George Park, all the greats. You know, I won't even name them all because they were awesome, but of course Ranger Bob was one of our favorites. And we got Doug Harlow, who is a famous reporter around here, and he is interviewing our former town manager, Pat Dickey, and this was done by John Harlow. It's kind of a homage to his father, and also thinking about those days when then these people were helping make the place really great. And now we're moving into spring, and you can see you start with crocuses, move to daffodils, and then these are the roses for the Margaret Shea Smith Rose Garden in Coburn Park. And here are the two graduates, and the graduates always like to have their picture taken at Coburn Park every year, graduating from high school. So, and there's a moose. Sometimes moose fall into the river and try to swim across, and they swim across and stuff, which is kind of wild. Here's a guy that I found, two guys in DB Park passed out from, I think, overdoses, called 911, and they got them Narcan and things. And here I am and my wife in our solar electric car that we built back in the early 2000s in DB Park, in that area, and there's now a really nice river trail that goes along the river. And so we'll go back up top again, and we have, see if you can see, somewhere back behind Lake George Park, there may be the elusive Sasquatch. I made a map of different Sasquatch sightings, and I sold it to some of the ladies, you know, to help out the park, right? And I sold it to some of the ladies at the lunch area and the lunch ladies at the high school, and they said, what about the sighting in Canaan? Or how about the one by Eaton Mountain? So I realized this is something that's been going on for a long time, And does the Sasquatch exist? Who knows? And then you go down a little bit and you got Skowhegan Area High School and field hockey, which has always been a big thing and is a big, big thing in Skowhegan Area High School. And you got WSKW, which is a big radio station. And of course, now we have WXNZ 98.1. And but it may be soon changing to another number. So, and then way up top, you got the Balloon Festival, which was started by Katie Willett, and it was a wonderful thing to do. And I thought, I've got to try it out. So, went to the ATM, took out $200, and took a very short balloon ride. But it was like probably the only time I ever get a chance to do that. And the interesting thing is, winds are different. So the wind takes you this way, and then you pop up a little, and it takes you right back to where you went, because the winds were different at different heights. So we ended up on Bigelow Hill. It was fun. And then down below that, you got another big thing at Skowhegan Area High School, which is the drama department. And so that's Men of La Mancha, and that's one of my former students, Kyle Lee. This has been a big thing, and they won a lot of awards for it. And speaking of theater sort of things, we have Empire Falls. Now, Empire Falls was filmed in Skowhegan, and it was a long production, and it was interesting to see it, see how it was filmed here in the town. And some of the biggies were there, including Danielle Pennebacher, Helen Hunt, Ed Harris, Paul Newman, of course, and I've forgotten his name right now. Anyway, he was another. He played the cop. He was a great guy. I'll think about it I'll think of it in 1 second here. And then you got the filming here, and as you go down, Skowhegan State Fair. That's always been big, and and there's another mural that Kevin James did that's all about the Skowhegan State Fair. It's on Haight Chevrolet right across the way. And you got Amber Lampke, outstanding in her field. She's very big on, she did the Maine Grains Complex and the Miller's Table, and has kind of created a revival of the grain economy in the state of Maine. And you got Main Street Skowhegan, which is helping out the town an awful lot. And this is kind of major coincidence, but I put 2022, and then Run of River got a big grant to do a lot of things in the town of Skowhegan. And so back on the top again, we got windmills, and those are sort of out of Skowhegan, but they're up north of us, and solar panels. There's an awful lot of that. Our new mascot, and it's been adopted, and the girls basketball just won a state championship, so that helped a lot. And we got Somerset Woods, which was Coburn Woods, started by Louise Helen Coburn. And you see Connor Files here, who just got his eagle, his scout badge of an eagle, did a really nice kiosk, so you know where you're going back there. And on the Russell Road, there are really nice trails that are being adopted by mountain bikers, and the mountain bikers are taking care of them, and they sweep them, and they do all sorts of wonderful things to them. And it makes a really nice area to walk and to recreate right here in Skowhegan. And then we got the Farmers Market, which has always been big, and it's every Saturday, and it's a great place to get really good food. And you got the Space on the River, started by Eli Soul and his wife, and they're starting up, they have activities like basketball and wonderful stuff happening. Then you got the Bernard Langley sculptures, and this one is actually called Woman with Tail, but we always think of it as the mermaid, and there's a lot of other Bernard Langley sculptures in town here. And that takes us to the end, and my name is down here, Iver Lofving, and I did this during the winter of 2021-2022. Thank you to all who helped out with it. Thank you to the West Renset Arts Council and everybody who was involved with it, especially John Harlow, and Saskia Reinhold, who got it all together.